harnessing hate and violence against LGBTQIs. A lot of discussion around sort of who belongs to the nation and who doesn't. And when it comes to queer refugees and queer migrants, they're obviously sort of on the very margins of those conversations. So these folks face, multiple intersecting degrees of exclusion and isolation, including from sort of humanitarian systems, the systems that are there to protect them. So basically, there's a heightened need for humanitarian actors to be providing safe spaces, tailored protection services, which kind of combat the unique forms of gender-based violence that queer refugees and migrants face. So HIAS has developed sort of innovative high-impact programs and partnerships, which align with our protection and localization strategy, with a variety of queer-led community-based organizations, including refugee-led organizations across Latin America, Kenya, and in Europe. And we have some examples of our work there. I can share the links in the chat after this. One of these responsible so here are sort of some of the pillars that underline this program. It's part of our regional gender and gender-based violence strategy in Latin America that seeks to meet the security and the protection needs of GBV survivors and generate safe spaces. It came about in 2023 as a result of a PRM-funded project, and initially was in Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru, but it's since expanded to Mexico as well. And it basically involves deep collaboration and partnerships with local LGBTQ organizations and communities. The objective of the program is to establish learning and co-creation spaces where we really try to center queer stories, queer experiences. So far, the outreach is to roughly 300 refugees. And basically, we focus on co-creating conversations, discussions around the various types of violence and discrimination that intersect with these communities, and also encourage community members to identify ways to transform. So to come up with community-based solutions based on their own understandings of resilience and capacity and strength. So to unpack the methodology a bit more, there's a series of meetings throughout the curricula, and each meeting is sort of centered on the people, their individual stories, which are obviously not homogenous and really unique. The facilitators come from HIAS as well as the queer-led CSOs that we're working with. And these folks really sort of facilitate the conversation, encourage individuals to reflect on the various topics, and their role is really to support the identification of those messages, the key messages around strengths and hopes and resilience. And of course, the meetings are designed around sort of principles of community empowerment, peer-to-peer learning and growth. So here's a look at sort of the meetings as they're laid out across 10 sessions. So we begin with sort of contracting safe spaces, establishing sort of aims and expectations. We look at the different kinds of diversity that's alive within the community. We look at tackling myths. We look at intersectionality, looking at community-based support networks, the importance of safe spaces, generating sort of stories and storytelling, rights awareness and rights empowerment, transformation, so putting ideas into action, and then themes of sort of protection, empowerment, and self-care. And all of these meetings and topics are kind of interwoven throughout the curricula. We're implementing this in, as I said, 4 countries across Latin America. In Mexico, we're based in Tapachula, and we're working alongside an LGBTQ safe house called Casa Frida. In Colombia, we're in 2 places, Cali and Ipiales, and we work alongside an organization called Red Somos. In Ecuador, we are in 4 cities, and we work with a regional LGBTQ organization called Diálogo Diverso. And then in Peru, we're in Lima, and we work alongside another queer-led organization there called Si Vida. And the impacts of the program, while it's kind of still in its early stages, and we have been given funding for another year of this, the outcomes are quite promising so far. We have about 95 to 97% of participants reporting sort of improved feelings of safety and protection, similar levels of sort of improvement in rights awareness, and then, of course, all of the benefits that come from generating these safe spaces and connections between communities and community members. And we capture sort of the results and we monitor the programs through, I guess, sort of participatory, qualitative kinds of analysis. And we have something called a travel backpack, which basically allows the participants to register their thoughts and feelings and reflections on an ongoing basis, and to really capture kind of quite deep qualitative information about how people are feeling about the program. And then, of course, using that information to feed back into the program design itself and sort of improve things along the way. So this is sort of just a regional curriculum as it stands. I did mention that we're doing work with other sort of queer-led organizations and communities in Kenya, where we've had quite a deep connection with the queer refugee community since about 2013. And then more recently on the Ukraine response, where we are working through a network of women-led organizations, intersectional, feminist and queer-led organizations on the Ukraine response. Some of those are organizations that are working directly with queer communities as well. And so this is definitely a model which we're seeing good results from in Latin America, and we'd like to scale up, ideally in those places as well. I think that I will stop here. I don't even sort of see these, but here's some images from some of the workshops with folks in the curriculum in Ecuador. And I'm happy to provide sort of more information and answer any questions or reflections or feedbacks or any of your experiences that you have working with sort of queer-led organizations or members of the queer refugee and migrant community as well. But I wanted to kind of keep it brief and just give a very high level overview. As I said, happy to have conversations or discussions about any of that plus more. But I think that I'll stop it there and see if there's anything from the group. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for keeping very well to time. I'm looking
I
to
try.
see, you did a great job. So I'm trying to see if we have any questions in the chat. And also, Constance, I know you're online and there's a lot of focus on refugees here. So I don't know if you wanted to follow up with any comments from the refugee side. Constance is with UNHCR. And I know they do a lot of the work with refugees. And then we have IOM with the migrants. We have Louise here as well, both who also cover Latin America. So I don't know if you want to add anything or make any comments, or if there's any questions that people want to raise. And feel free just to raise your hand or open your mic. We don't have so many people today, so it's quite manageable. And I don't see anyone, but it's great. So Ian, from Erla, is there any work stream of specific coordination around LGBTQI plus? Ian, I'm not sure. Do you want to just
Yeah, in terms of sort of humanitarian networks, HIAS is obviously doing some really strong work in this, and there are some others that, with the GBV side, sort of, I do think, I imagine maybe wrongly, that it's a bit of a substrata of sort of GBV in emergencies writ large. So I wonder if there's any, yeah, sort of informal coordination mechanisms between different actors that are concentrating on this particular area of work.
Yeah, Hester, I guess also the question is, are you aware of links with any of the GBV subclusters in um, Colombia or Ecuador or any of the countries that you're working in? Could be a question as well.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't sort of a lot of this conversation happens, to my knowledge, in forums like this, and as far as I know, at the moment, there isn't any sort of formalized, dedicated sub-working group structure or task force which is dedicated to specifically LGBTQ topics. There have been sort of temporary forums which have been dedicated to specific processes. So I remember around 2021, there was quite a lot of work going on, and maybe my UNHCR colleagues can speak more to this, around the LGBT roundtable, which UNHCR was organizing at the time. And we're also present in various sort of working groups which are dedicated to the development of specific tools and guidance. And HIAS is, in fact, at the beginning stages of developing a piece of guidance on working with LGBTQ communities, which will sort of entail some of what I've just presented, as well as our other work and work that's happening in other spaces as well. And that's something that I'd be keen to get your inputs on when the time is right. But as far as I know, no, there's nothing formalized in that space, and nothing in a continuing sense. I could be wrong, and colleagues, if you have any information, I'd be very keen to hear about those. But to my knowledge, no.
So, just so you're, in case you're not aware, there, and it's too bad Jessica already jumped off because it's a bit late for her in Nairobi. But they have a pillar structure at the regional level in Nairobi, and it's too bad Christine Appio's not here, but it was mentioned she's a trainer for the TOT right now happening in Ethiopia. But they do have a pillar that looks at different intersectionalities, including LGBTQI, including male survivors, disabilities, looking at different areas. So we can put you in touch with her for that communication. Caroline, do you want to just say your comment
Fantastic.
quickly? Caroline from Interaction.
Hi, yes, happy to. I was just putting in the chat that Interaction has an LGBTQI plus task team, and we've been quite US focused in that we have worked directly with BHA to host various events. They've all been private, but we've sought to really elevate and uplift local organizations and activists where we had different community members from Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Uganda, Kenya. But we are looking to really understand how we can have a specific value add. It's been quite US based, so we don't want to make any other efforts redundant. But if others are working at this at a global level, BHA is quite interested, but we don't have the funds behind it to really have specific activities other than kind of awareness raising.
Thank you, Caroline. Caroline's from Interaction. And I see Constance now has her hand up from UNHCR. Over to you, Constance.
Yeah, I was hesitating a bit because I think the examples we have are really from refugee settings, and that that I just I think that's good learning for the AoR, but I was just hesitating to present that here. I think the examples that Hester referred to that we're doing together in collaboration with HIAS are also more refugee settings. For example, in the work in Kenya, America's mixed movements. Less so, I have to say, on IDP settings. I think that they're more under the provision of the AoR, but I think there's a lot of lessons learned that can be shared and adapted. And I think where you ask about task team structures, I think oftentimes the work that's done at national level has to also be done more hidden than through very official coordination structures, particular in sensitive refugee settings. So it's nothing that is necessarily really openly advertised. So it depends from context to context. I think there's a lot of learning on the refugee side. I don't have a lot of examples from the IDP settings, unfortunately, but would love to hear more on that from those contexts. And in terms of tools that are being developed, they could certainly be adapted as well when we get there. And I think the roundtable, Hester, that you referred to was also really refugee specific, but there's certainly guidance coming out that's relevant across populations. So I'm glad you put the topic on that table here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, we saw with the minimum standards and with the SOPs that there's a lot that can be learned between the IDP and refugee settings. So I think sharing learning is always very useful. Cecilia has written in the chat that HIAS actively attends the GBV subcluster meetings in Colombia and Ecuador, as well as the regional working group. The other thing I just wanted to raise, and it's a little bit, I think, just more around the sensitivities. We're hearing from a couple of the countries that they're wondering if they should be changing their names and not even talking about GBV or gender. And in one of the countries, we were actually told that, they have to really look at any communication that is going to go past the ministry to make sure it doesn't say LGBTQI because it could get them shut down. So I think, the sensitivities, Caroline, that you were talking about with these, smaller closed spaces that people are exploring how to address needs, with Syria and Lebanon. I know in Colombia, same-sex marriage is legal. There's a lot of different contexts and settings, and so I think looking with sensitivity in each context is important. But I really appreciate you raising this here, as Constance said, looking at some of the practices that we can learn from each other. And definitely, Hester, will be happy to put you in touch with our colleagues in Nairobi. And if anyone else wants to be in touch, if you can put your email in the chat for further dialogue, or if people want to follow up one-on-one with you to give other examples or learn more about your work, that would be great. So Constance, is that still a legacy hand, or did you want to say something else?
No, sorry. Take it on.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so thank you very much. And we're going to, I don't see any other questions in the chat. So we're going to move on to Simone Lott, who is part of the GBV AoR coordination team. And she is going to talk about a lot of work that she's been doing on the GBV analytical framework. And just to say, this actually started when we had Frey as our information manager, which, as some of you know, was a number of years ago, and then continued with Jay, who came after Frey, and then Simone came in and did a whole lot of other changes. And it's actually now at the designers, so it's done. Although I think, over time things can be tweaked, but we're really excited that this is finally done, and I am going to hand it over to Simone to share.
Thank you, Jennifer. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I think I have met a few of you. So I joined GBViE last year as an IM consultant, and I've been working on this for almost a year now. But yeah, as Jennifer said, we are very happy that we finally able to finalize this version. And currently we are doing some design work for the guidance notes, and we are hoping that we will be able to share with the wider groups very soon. So it started with Frey, and then G has worked on it as well. And this has built on our learnings from existing analytical framework from protection cluster, sexual exploitation and abuse risk overview framework, GF, and also child protection analytical framework. So we have done test review for these existing frameworks when we develop our analytical framework as well. So first of all, what is GBV analytical framework? It is essentially an overarching framework. It gives us an overall guidance around GBV data collections, analysis in the humanitarian emergency. So particularly, it highlights what sort of informations or analytical questions we should be asking ourselves so that we have the essential information to identify the GBV risks and also GBV needs in the affected populations. It's guides through primary data collections and also the secondary data review, because sometimes we are not so sure what sort of data information that we should be collecting around GBV, and most of the GBV actors, they are overwhelmed with the information available and also not knowing how to structure the information. So this framework is really providing a structural information landscape in terms of GBV data for the GBV risks and also GBV needs. So the primary purpose and also intended audience is that the GBV coordinators and information management specialists, but we really hope that it will be also helpful for our GBV AoR members as well, for their IMs as well, so that we can have the panoramic view of the GBV information landscape, so that to support the GBV data collection and analysis in the emergency context. So we have 3 domains in terms of the information domain. So the first domain is the context and gender dimensions. In the second domain, we have GBV risk factors, and then the third one is around trends and patterns of GBV. I will go a little bit into detail for each of these domains a bit later. And then we also have the overarching domains, which look at humanitarian profile, what are the existing capacities around to prevent and respond for the GBV. And when we develop this framework, analytical framework, we use a little bit of theory and background and existing knowledge on a couple of things. So the first one is the ecological model. We've used different layers of from the ecological model. We use individual relationship level, community level, society level when we consider about the GBV risks, and also the information category, so that it reflects well at the different levels of risks and different levels of needs. And in addition to that, we also take consideration into account for the risk equation. So I believe this photo picture was referenced from the interaction group as well, because when we look at the protection analytical framework, they have also used a similar risk equation. So when we develop the GBV analytical framework, we apply this as well, especially in the second domain of the analytical framework, when we structure information around the GBV and align risk factors. And then last not least, we also take into consideration of the different level of crisis time point, just to take into account that all these GBV risks and also vulnerable groups for ASMR could be changed over time when the crisis unfolds. So in the guidance, we particularly focus that at different points of the crisis timeline, this information landscape could be changed over time, and the GBV address needs to take into account. So in terms of usage, we hope that this GBV analytical framework will be useful, how to structure the GBV analysis, GBV informations to inform GBV coordination and also programming, especially around, when we want to identify GBV risks, because most often time we were being asked what are the incidents of GBV, whereas there are other proxy questions to show that GBV is occurring in the community, and we don't really need the incident data to prove that, to be able to provide response. So I think this is very helpful, so that we have the informations and proxy questions around what are the analytical questions we should be considering or we should be analyzing in addition to incidence data, which is which could be risky to be collected and which could impose harm on the survivor, as we all know. And we are also hoping that this could also help us to transform GBV data to actionable analysis. For example, we could conduct secondary data review using the analytical framework, and we could be using this information to write the narrative or structure for the humanitarian needs overview and HRB for the GBV sectoral analysis. And before I go into a bit of details for the age categories, we just want to highlight that this is not a data collection tool. So as I mentioned before, it provides an overall information landscape and guiding questions for each information domains, but it is not a data collection tool itself. So you cannot use it to collect data, for example, but you could use it as an overarching guidance around what information you need to be collecting and what sort of analytical questions that you should be asking for each domain. And then the assessment tools could be adapted based on each context. But this is not a data collection tool or monitoring and evaluation tools. This tool itself will not produce the data. So in terms of key products, we have the two main tools for this. So the first one is the Excel tool, which we have the conceptual diagram. We also have definition and description for each domain of the information categories. And we also have an analysis plan guidance, so which have the guiding analytical questions and information needs around each category. And I will go a little bit into details in the following slides. And then the second one, we also have accompanying technical guidance notes. So it has an outline of how do we use this Excel to each category, why are we collecting this information on each category, this sort of thing. So for step-by-step detailed guidance, you can find in the technical guidance notes. So this is just a glimpse of what we have for the Excel tool. So we have the main conceptual diagram. And as I have mentioned before, we have three main domains. And under that, we have the three subdomains. So the first one is the context and gender dimensions. It also integrates the essential components of the gender analysis. I'm not so sure if it's more to see the categories. So categories are more in details level of information. For example, institutional and security environment, we have legal system and justice, where we look at if there are any national laws that would prevent and protect women and girls from gender-based violence. What is the existing health system? For example, information around clinical management of rape. Is there any CMR task force in the country? Yeah. Or like CMR standardized protocols in the country, this sort of information. So these are the details category and each subdomains. And then for the second domain, we will be looking at underlying and GBV risk factors. So under that, we have three subdomains as well, GBV threats and vulnerabilities, access and response services. And then the third one is around negative coping mechanisms. I'm not going into too much in detail for this category, but we also have more details category for these domains as well. For example, threats and vulnerabilities, we will be looking at population at risk, vulnerable conditions, what are the safety perceptions. So this category will be mainly related to safety audits and conducting assessment around safety perceptions of women and girls. And then just to highlight that these are just an overarching bird's eye views of GBV related information, but we don't really necessarily mean that you have to collect all these information, but it is more about providing the overall guidance. And for example, if a GBV coordinator have been deployed into this context, then they could identify maybe 2 or 3 relevant subdomains, or for example, categories, and see identifying where are the information gaps. And maybe they will find that, oh, we don't actually need to collect this data. We can have this from the secondary data review from the existing data sources. So it's really flexible approach. And this is more like an overview and overall guidance around all the related information for GBV, so that we can identify what are the underlying risk factors and also what are the patterns and trends around GBV as well. And then in terms of EXO tools, we have for the different domains and subdomains, as you can see here, we have the information category columns, and then we have the guiding analytical questions. But this really is a top level analytical questions that would guide about, because sometimes we are doing GBV analysis, but we don't really have what output we want to achieve. So it's kind of help our IM focus to see what are the guided analytic questions or what outputs that they want to achieve from this analysis. And then we also outline some of the information needs for each categories and what are the potential data sources that they could be collecting this information if they want to do the secondary data review. And of course, this is not the exhaustive list of data sources, and it could also vary and different from context to context as well. And then this is the example preview for the EXO2 for the second domain. And this is for the third domain. For example, here in terms of trends and patterns of GBV, we also trying to link with the existing GBV IMS system and information points within the GBV IMS. And of course, it will depend on the information sharing protocol within the context as well. But here, for example, we could be looking at patterns of GBV by specific population group, geographical region. For example, service provision and referral category, we could look at what are the patterns around, days between GBV incident reporting and service referral. Is the increase in trends for the days between GBV incidents and referral, this sort of information. So it's really give us an overall structure around how we should approach these types and patterns of GBV in addition to incidents. Because we shouldn't be looking at the numbers of cases as an indicator for GBV trends and types. Is more about how we approach this information and what sort of patterns or trends we should be looking at. So it's also here, all the GBV IMS data points, relevant data points are highlighted here as well. And in terms of practical application, we have a few secondary data reviews based on the previous versions of the analytical framework. So we've also revised the secondary data review template so that it reflects the revised version. And we are also hoping that this could be also used for designing GBV assessment for different contexts and, for example, safety audits, and to integrate some sort of structural information to identify either GBV risks or GBV needs, or either to analyze the trends for the GBV incidents in the given context. But so yeah, it's currently under design because I didn't really include the guidance notes here, but this is just a preview for what we have so far. I'm just going back just to show the guidance notes. So this is going to be what it looks like for the guidance notes, and we have all the details information here. And this is just a preview of the secondary data review. Yeah, I think this is everything. Jennifer, if you want to add anything, feel free to.
Yeah, I just saw that Louise from IOM wrote, "Thanks so much. This is very timely for us. Is there any plan to integrate with the GBV analysis package with the PUF developed by the GPC?" So maybe you want to just talk a little bit. I kind of wrote a response there, but if you want to say how you're aligning with the GPC, and also maybe just mention a little bit of the consultation process, because I know there has been a lot of consultation with different GBV actors in the development.
So I didn't do that consultation, to be honest. Jay has done a series of consultation. So when we look at the production analytical framework, we try to be aligned with their pillars and sub-pillars. So in the Excel sheet, there is a column where we match with their pillars and sub-pillars. And then in this version, we remove it mostly because with the GF and all the pillars and sub-pillars changing over time. So we thought it's not very realistic to keep it matching. So we just keep it as a overall like background on where we look at the domains and subdomains. But for example, the first domain, there are AAF TELAS is also like context background, and of course they didn't really focus on the gender. So the key categories of information will be slightly different, but for the TELAS and sub-TELAS, we look at their TELAS and sub-TELAS as well.
And then you have a question from Aaron Patrick, who's asking about who are meant to be the core users for this tool.
So as I mentioned before, we primarily intended for our GBV coordinators and IM, focus GBV, IM, AoR, IM for using it for secondary data review or conducting GBV related assessment, GBV risk assessment or GBV needs assessment in the field. But I'm hoping that it could also benefit for other, if we have INU members in the GBV subcluster and if they have good planning to conduct any GBV related assessment, then I think that could be helpful as well.
Diana, I see your camera is on. Does that mean we can get a comment from you as one of our founder GBV IMS people?
No, just to say hi and thank you so much. I'm very interested in the tool in the Excel sheet. This is amazing. I just had someone last week at the World Bank ask me to do something quite similar. So I'm so excited to see this because I'm sure it's something that I can build off on and adapt. So thank you so much. And I'm going to turn my camera off now, but it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Diana. Okay, Astrid, over to you for a comment.
Thank you. No, I just want to say for the consultations, because it's true, Simon came in after the consultations, but we have been working closely with the protection cluster in terms of the POW all along. So protection has been included. Sorry, I'm in the wind. And we really built it on all the other, well, on what they had, on what child protection had, on what the PSCA community has. And I think at the time there was also consultation with core members, those specifically interested. I know there are consultations with the COP and many others, and with coordinators, and the RIGAs have been very much involved.
And just to say, the secondary data review, we've been really pushing to have that done in each country. The one in Ukraine was actually done by our help desk, which we can't do for every single country, but really trying to get people to look at what research already exists before sort of saying like, oh, we need to do an assessment, and clearly depending on what's already available in the country, but they also just having people realize by just even looking at this, like, oh, did I look at all the laws? Did I look at the legal framework that exists in the country before doing a needs assessment? Did I, so I think it's also helpful in, did I consider all the different types of violence against women and girls, and just really use it to kind of spark a more broad way of capturing and looking at the GBV issues. So yeah, and like I said, this is, as different things change in the humanitarian community, we need to also look at it. But for example, now the Global Protection Cluster has they also are changing people all the time. So they asked if they can talk to us again about where we're at now. So I think also having this positions us much better in relation to the protection cluster, and having conversations with child protection, and in talking to other clusters, it can give them a better idea of all of the different issues we're looking at within GBV. So I think it helps professionalize us as well. And I think we've come a long way from when Frey started many years ago, of where we didn't have a clue of what information management sessions in Geneva we were even missing. So I think that the data world has really opened up in the last number of years. So Anyone else wanted to make any comment or have a question? I don't see anyone's hand. Okay, so
Can I add one sentence then?
Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
I'm just thinking for general use. I think for a lot of people, they might find just the conceptual diagram that will be in A3 size can be useful as a kind of clarifying moment, just to have the overview to help clarify your thoughts. I thought, at least the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, that's kind of, I don't know, things fell into place. And then it's true in terms of the direct relationship to the protection analysis framework, there is a GBV risk in there. So our analytical framework, in a way, feeds directly into that in terms of the protection analytical framework. And then, of course, it will be very useful as well when we maneuver into HNOs. Over. I'll stop there.
And Diana, are you raising your hand to say something now?
I am.
All right, go for it.
No, I just wanted to let you all know, if useful, that the World Bank will release on March 8th a new version of Women, Business, and the Law, and it gathers the latest laws from all over the world on intimate partner violence, including marital rape, sexual violence, sexual harassment, female genital mutilation, I think, and early forced child marriage. And so it's updated, and they also have a new module that they're testing on implementation. So they grade countries and kind of create an index to see how well they are in terms of having laws on all of those things. They give actual links to the actual laws, and then they get a report from at least 12 judges in the country on the implementation. So if that's helpful, Jen, I can send that to everyone when it's released on March 8th.
I think we'll have to have you come and present it on one of our calls. That would be sounds absolutely awesome and very useful. And we have Lena from IRC putting a thumbs up, but it would be great to have you come and do like a 10-minute presentation, you or your colleagues, whoever makes sense. But that sounds super useful, and I'm glad that the World Bank has done that. That sounds amazing. Thank you.
Okay, happy to.
Okay. Okay, so now we're going to go to Dina Haninia she's from CARE, and also many of you know her from the guidelines team. She is going to present on the digital minimum standards, which is another exciting new tool that people have been waiting for. So Dina, over to you.
Thanks so much, Jennifer, and hello, everyone. To those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Dina Hanania, and I'm the Senior GBV and Emergencies Knowledge Management Specialist at CARE, and also part of the GBV Guidelines Reference Group Coordination Team. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I will shift over to sharing my screen, but it looks like I'm having some Wi-Fi issues in the office today, so I will be going off camera for now, and hope you can all see my screen and hear me clearly. Let me just switch over to sharing my screen. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, thanks so much for having me today, and apologies in advance. For some of you, this might be a bit repetitive, but we want to make sure that we're just spreading the news as far and wide as possible. So I'm just very excited to introduce you to the new GBV and Emergencies Digital Minimum Standards initiative that CARE is leading on behalf of the interagency community. And just as many of you have noticed over the last few years, digital GBV and emergencies tools and solutions have been very, very rapidly multiplying, particularly since the onset of COVID. So there are lots of digital tools that are already out there and in use. And just to share a few examples, this includes virtual women and girls safe spaces like UNICEF's LAHA or e-referral pathways, and just tools to support non-GBV specialized practitioners to respond to GBV disclosures like the GBV Pocket Guide mobile app. And, in many ways, this comes with a lot of incredible opportunities to, expand our reach, particularly in hard to access areas where humanitarian access is restricted. But kind of on the flip side of that same coin, I think this comes with a real potential for harm and a full host of risks that are not fully identified and understood yet. And so with all that said, the purpose of this work is to bring the interagency community together to develop interagency endorsed digital minimum standards for GBV and emergencies programming that first, maximize the benefits of potentially life-saving digital tools and solutions, and then ensure that the associated risks are minimized, and ultimately, creating a supportive, safer, and more productive environment for women and girls or others at risk of GBV, hopefully putting us in a place as a community where we're very clear about what a safe digital tool for GBV and emergencies programming looks like. And we're very, very lucky to have a more extended time horizon for this process. And so with that, I just want to underscore kind of the approach that this work will center as we go. So the project itself is divided into 3 phases, really with an emphasis on centering the perspective of women and girls in hard-to-reach areas throughout the process. And so in phase 1, which will take roughly a year, we'll partner with women rights organizations and women-led organizations on the countries listed on the screen here. And we'll dedicate the first year of this work to really just consult widely and dig as deep as we can to understand the full hosts of risks and opportunities that are related to digital GBV and emergencies tools and programming, and try to just glean lessons learned across, different levels from initiatives that have been, rolled out in many ways or attempted. And so our consultations will include, consultations at the field level, as well as with practitioners at the country level and at the global level. And really the outcome of this phase, or what this phase will culminate in, is kind of a collective decision on what issues exactly the standards will need to speak to be, as relevant as possible, and to address, the full host of risks or issues that we need to be attuned to. And then that will take us kind of into the development of the actual standards themselves, roughly a year, and finally roughly a year for dissemination. And that will kind of allow us to strategically maximize, the uptake of the standards once they're developed in both the humanitarian community and also across or like among tech developers. And so in the next few weeks, and just as part of this scoping phase I was mentioning, we'll be launching global consultations with practitioners in the form of virtual KIIs to just gain a better understanding of the full range of potential safety risks in the context of these digital GBV and emergencies interventions. And then just kind of glean, again, lessons learned from the experiences of people who have been working in this area for a few years now. And these will be used to supplement, findings from a literature review of the existing materials that are out there that have been, developed by different agencies, as well as some helpful materials from the AoR help desk. But if you would be interested in being a part of these consultations, or maybe you have a colleague in mind who has worked at the intersections of GBV and tech, or developed the intersections of developed a tool that kind of speaks to that intersection to support GBV and emergencies programming, I'll drop a form in the chat that you can use to sign yourself up for the consultations, or recommend one of your colleagues. I'm also joined on the call now by Erin Patrick, my colleague who is also a part of the project. So Erin, feel free to jump in if there's anything you would like to add, but that's all from me for now. And we'll just be sure to share more updates with the group as the work continues to progress. And of course, I'm really happy to answer any questions that you may have in the chat, or connect more bilaterally if you would like to learn more about the project. So I'll stop here and back to you, Jen.
So you're generating a lot of excitement in the chat. And I know that this was raised at the annual meeting that we had with our core members last year as an emerging issue, all the issues related to GBV and technology. I mentioned that UNFPA just had a 3-day seminar. I have to say it's the technical division, so I'm less familiar of exactly what but I know that UNFPA is also working a lot on this from the development side. So you're probably already in touch with them, but if not, we're happy to put you in touch. Erin, Patrick, over to you.
Just really quickly wanted to, I mean, Dina mentioned it, but I really want to just draw out the fact that we're purposely with this project trying to flip the typical standards development process on its head. I think, we're all used to kind of a bunch of us so-called experts sitting in a room together and figuring out what the standard should look like and then going and trying to validate them at the field level. And, obviously that's how it's been done for a long time. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But with this particular project, we're doing it the opposite. So we're starting with those consultations with the women in the places where we feel like the remote tools are most likely to be, or the digital tools, remote programming and that sort of thing are most likely to be used. So that's why you see it's like Yemen and Syria and Afghanistan. So like, really the most challenging places so that we can hear from women there what they want the standards to look like from the beginning so that they're already designed from that perspective. And then we will go back and validate again. But we're starting off with their voice instead of starting off with our voice and then seeking validation later. So just wanted to really pull that out and thank Dina for spearheading this whole thing. And thanks for putting the link in the chat, Dina, because we really are interested to hear from as many of you as possible too. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Erin, and thanks, Jen, for the space. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you. And just to say, it looks like you're already getting some volunteers. That's always a good sign. Thank you, Gaia. Gaia is with IPPF. She's been in different hats. She has worked with UNFPA in the past, but she's currently the representative of IPPF. Some of you knew other IPPF people from before, so it's good to have them engaged with us always. So feel free to either just note down the contact information or get in touch directly and bilaterally, or if you need support getting in touch, let us know. I don't see any other comments. I'm just trying to make sure I'm not missing any hands. So we're actually doing great on time. Our last speaker is Paula Ramirez, who some of you know has been supporting the GBV AoR with stress management, with capacity building around working with frontline responders. We first had her start with us during COVID when we saw the huge increase globally on different forms of gender-based violence, and in particular, intimate partner violence, and really seeing that frontline responders, including folks working on MHPSS, were burning out, were exhausted, were feeling guilty that they weren't providing the quality of care that they were used to applying. And IOM has supported Paula's work with us, so we're very grateful to IOM, which is PRM funding, say from the start. And she worked online for quite some time and finally was able to go to Ukraine, to Poland, and she already reported on that. And after that, she was in Guatemala as well as in Egypt, in Cairo, and she gave some support to some of the national staff who had fled and had horrific stories of fleeing Sudan to Cairo. And then also, for the first time, we also had her support refugee context in Cairo so that she was working with the service providers. And we had discussed this with both Constance and Louise, so IOM and UNHCR, about doing some support to the frontline responders who were hearing all the stories from the Sudanese who had become refugees because they fled from Sudan into Egypt. So I've asked her to come and just give a little bit of an update on that work that she had in person in those different contexts. So, and by the way, she's in Australia. So I don't know what time it is there, but I think it's a pretty ungodly hour, like, I don't know, 5 a.m. or something. But we really appreciate, Paula, you waking up and coming onto the call at the end. And just actually to mention, Jessica spoke at the beginning about the case management training that they were doing in Mozambique, and then just very recently in Ethiopia and Tigray, and how she really noted the burnout and the levels of stress that frontline responders were experiencing. So I feel like she started off the call, and it's nice to have you ending with your experience. So over to you.
Thank you, Jen. So yeah, for me, it's exactly 3:49 a.m. So yeah, very good to be here with all of you and to get to share a little bit about this experience, taking this the approach that we've been developing with the GBV AoR around self-care. So can I share my screen, Shiva? Well, while I can share the screen, I can start sharing
Yes,
a little bit.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah. So just for the ones who have not heard about this before, I'm just going to give a brief outline of what is it that we do, and a little bit of the groups and what happened. What is it that we are actually doing? So yes, Jennifer mentioned this whole program started to like for giving support to first responders. Yeah, like not only on self-care, yes, like self-care, but we know that, for example, it's important to sleep well. We know that it's important to eat on times, but sometimes it's very difficult to integrate because we are constantly in these survival states where it's difficult to actually integrate things that are good for us. So a lot of the work that we've been doing is based on a grounding or mindfulness-based stress reduction program, which a trauma-sensitive lens that can cultivate this capacity to come into the present in our body and in our felt sense. Again, I will talk about this more in a moment. So we had in Egypt 3 groups. We had one group which were national staff from Sudan, and because of current situation living in Cairo. The scope was on stress reduction and building up resilience in them, and building up really coping mechanisms through body-based practices that allow emotional integration. And again, I will in the next slide give a little bit of more depth around what we mean by this. Groups 2 and 3 were a combination of GBV and protection actors who are part of the refugee response. We had INGOs and local organizations, and the scope was on stress reduction and improving capacity on case management. Yes, like we have found, and actually the name that we are having for the course at the moment, which is self-care as capacity building, that name came actually from these groups in Egypt, because they were saying, I wish I could have more awareness of how my emotional regulation could be built from the awareness of my body while doing case management training, because it's a very effective way to be with oneself, to stay connected with oneself, and in that way provide a good quality of support and response. In Guatemala, we had 2 groups as well, one coordinated through UNFPA and the GBV subcluster, and the other one by the Ministry of Health. We had, a group of overall 40 women. And also, the numbers from Guatemala didn't show up. But we like to think as self-care as an ethical imperative. So a lot of the work that we are doing during these sessions go around understanding how our brain works under stress responders, like what I called before the survival mechanism states. What happens with our brain, but what happens with our overall nervous system when we are in these states, which actually that activation at the level of the nervous system is the one that keeps us from really being able to integrate practices that we know are good for us and for the restoration of our nervous system. So what we do in these courses is bring the awareness again back to the present. Why is this important? We not only have the five senses that we know of, but we also have other senses that are very important in emotional regulation and in the capacity of restoring our nervous system, consciousness being a full body phenomena, yes, and mental health being something that happens through our whole body as well. So we work with the capacity of interoception, yes, which is the knowing moment to moment of what's happening in our body. For many of us and for people who are working in first response, there's this thing of like not like disconnecting from the body and really not knowing what is happening with it until we end up going to the doctor. Yes. But because of a lot of stress accumulated. So this capacity of coming back again into ourselves, cultivating that capacity of knowing what is happening actually helps with that stress reduction. This is one thing that we worked with all the groups, but specifically with these groups and the Sudanese group that were in Cairo while and during the crisis. Proprioception, which is the capacity we have to feel our body in relationship to space with our balance and our posture, and neuroception, which is the moment-to-moment detection of threat and safety. So if we think that the nervous system is constantly asking the question around safety, yes, if we're safe or we're not safe, and we may be in a place that is safe, yes, but if inside ourselves we're not feeling safe, we're actually never going to feel safe, which is one of the focuses that we had with the group of Sudan, which was like how to bring again the quality of resting, how to bring again the quality of sleep after having had that much amount of activation and coming back to Cairo and bringing that system back into the alignment of the compass, yes, of our body, the felt sense of safety, and to stay in our full bodily autonomy, yes. And this was true as well for the other groups, again, like while doing case management work, the amount of stories they hear, there's a disconnection again, like with what they feel. So at some point we had people that were very overwhelmed by the amount of cases they were hearing, or people who didn't feel anything at all. And again, this capacity of feeling oneself to be able to feel the other is what we are building in this self-care as an ethical imperative point of view. Yeah, it's the best way from where we can do the work that we do. So yeah, this is a very brief report, that in this session I wanted to bring what we were doing there, the groups that we had, and I would like to give some space for comments or questions if there's anything that want to be.
So any questions or comments? You have a compliment from Constance thanking you for the amazing work that you do and how important it is, particularly now. I think we heard Jessica saying that at the beginning. I know that I guess it's today's Paula's time, but tomorrow our time is going to present to Jessica's regional group. She's done that before with the LACRO. She's done a lot of these sessions, a series of 6, an hour and a half each week. She's done in a number of the Latin American countries, as well as, you know, Afghanistan. She just started meeting a couple of times with the coordinators in Afghanistan. So just to say, our goal is for her support to be interagency because she's part of the AoR. But if there are countries that you know there would be interest, we're also focusing as well on women-led organizations. I don't know if Fatima's still on, but she was in one of them. She's done a couple of 2 or 3 of the sessions on the community of practice. So you might have seen the invite, and some people have participated in that. So there's been different opportunities to be part of this work. And Paula did present at SVRI in Cancun, the work. We did actually together a morning workshop ahead of SVRI as some of the pre-conferences. But just to say also, if you have interest that you think that there's a group of interagency frontline responders who you think would benefit, please let us know. And she is going to do, Sarah has invited her to do one of the webinars on the community of practice to basically share some of the work that she did and shared at the last SVRI that didn't really get shared outside of SVRI. She's also has sort of developed a level 2 more in depth, and she has some ongoing groups. One in Latin America has been going a couple of years now. So people can start applying what they're learning to the work that they're doing and get feedback from Paula on that. So there's been some combination of in-person and then with follow-up that's hybrid. So feel free to also reach out to Paula directly if you have questions. And you can put maybe your email in the chat, Paula, if people have questions.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's exactly 6 o'clock, 6:01. So if there's no comments from anyone else, then thank you all very much for joining our call. Again, apologies for the time change. We had a clash with the community of practice, our own planning, but this was our first call this year. So I was glad to see all of you turn out for that. And looking forward to continuing to work together this year as we try to face the many challenges that are existing right now with all of the conflicts, and good time to have a reminder to take care of ourselves as well, because it doesn't look like it's getting any better. So don't forget the self-care. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.